Okay. And the YouTube channel link to find our recording today, going in the chat here. There you go. It's where you can find it after we're finished. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Diversity and Local History Grant workshop. I am Aletheia Wittman, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility Officer here at the Washington State Historical Society. And I am joined by my colleagues, Jay and Allison, who you'll also see on the call and maybe jumping in now and then to support me in this workshop. Our focus today, as I mentioned before, is looking at the application process for the Diversity and Local History Grant. So I am going to share my screen for y'all so we can take a look at these slides we've prepared for you. Please do let us know in the chat if you're having any issues with accessing any of the information we're sharing, or if you're having any technology issues, we'll try to assist. Okay, so the Diversity in Local History Grant. I have already introduced myself. I guess I'll just say too that I've been in this role since October. And so I am new to managing the Diversity and Local History Grant, but had a good amount of time to dig into the work of the grant program and be available and connecting with our current grantees and talking to prospective grantees. So here's all the contact information you may need about how to reach me. Also, Jay, our Director of Heritage Outreach, and Allison, the Heritage Outreach Manager. Oh, you're not seeing the slides. Okay. Can you see the slides now by any chance?
Slide 3, so you're seeing slide 3.
You're seeing slide 3, and then when I press present, it looks like you're still seeing it in edit mode. Is that true?
Correct.
Let's open it up again. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to just Okay, we're going to try one more time to see if I can present the slides and you can see them in the right mode. Let's see here. I think that for some reason I can see it being shared, but you might not be able to be. Let me see. Okay, how does that look to folks? Is that kind of like bigger? Are you able to see that better?
Okay. Yes.
Thank you, Paul. All right. Thank you, Jay. All right. So this is also just a bit of housekeeping. This QR code is going to take you to our Diversity and Local History Grant webpage, where you can find a lot of great information like the grant guidelines and information about important dates, like the closing date for DLH and the review period. And as many of you know, the grant application opened February 20th. April 12th, the grant application is due. And in June, that's when the grant awards are announced. And then there's the period July 2024 to June 2025 when project work is happening. And we're checking in with you, with grantees, on how the project work is going. And of course, June of 2025, that's when those projects are going to be completed, final reports are being submitted. So that gives you a brief snapshot of the timeline. So just to say a little bit about at the highest level of what the grant is trying to do, the grant program awards small grants to heritage organizations to fund paid internships that support inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, or for short, IDEA initiatives. And then grant proposals, they should be supporting the integration of IDEA principles into an organization's operations and promote a long-term focus on whole history practices. And when we say whole history, I think often folks have heard the term like inclusive history, and we're using whole history here just to indicate that what we're hoping for is really work that is centered on just telling the totality, the correct, the full history, in that it includes diverse perspectives and voices that are inclusive. So grants are open to all heritage organizations in Washington state, regardless of an existing track record or commitment to IDEA work. There's some definitions that we go over in the guidelines, which are available on our website. And these are just terms and words that you will see come up again and again in how we talk about the grant and in the application itself. So this is just, I think, a good list of words and terms to be familiar with in how we're using them. Many organizations have their own organizational definitions of, for example, diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility. These are the ones that we're using, so you can kind of have a window into the world of how we understand some of these terms at Washington State Historical Society and where we're coming from and how we talk about this grant program. So I won't go through all of them here, but I do hope that you take a look, especially at how we're defining IDEA. But heritage organization, that is one thing to quickly touch base on. We understand that as a group whose purpose is to collect, preserve, or interpret history and culture. And intern, we understand to be a student or graduate gaining supervised practical experience. So, who is eligible for this grant? There is more on eligibility in our guidelines. Some things to highlight here for you all is that nonprofits, tribal organizations, and local governmental entities in Washington state are eligible. So if you are, for example, a city, like local government entity, then you would be eligible. If you have within your charge to be preserving and interpreting local history. And organizations must have a mission to preserve and interpret history and heritage for the general public. That's kind of like an overall eligibility requirement. So responsibilities. This is important moving into the application process because we ask questions about what you have available to support your intern. And so this responsibility is something to really be thinking about. So we ask that organizations provide a project manager for interns who can be available to the intern to guide the work and support their professional development. So that's really critical. this can be a paid staff or a volunteer. And ideally, this person has some professional training or demonstrated experience in areas that the intern would be working. So museums, public history, anthropology, libraries and archives, or a related field. And this is not a requirement, but we really feel like this is going to be a strength of a project that can support this for an intern. So we expect that there are regular check-ins with the interns to guide their work. So project support is offered, and that this person who is the project manager is in a position to be able to make decisions about the project. So they have some power in the project and influence. And finally, we asked that there would be, this project manager would be able to provide a positive educational experience for interns. So organizations must have funds to pay interns at $21 an hour, at least twice monthly. Grants are distributed on a reimbursement basis, and reimbursements may be requested only upon documentation of payment to interns. So this is really important to think through your internal processes to just make sure that you're able to pay an intern but before that reimbursement is given. So that's why we are asking that grantees have that capacity in place. And of course, we wouldn't expect that the grantee has the full grant amount available, but certainly should plan to have at least 1 month's payments for interns on hand throughout the project. And in the application process, we ask for documentation that supports, it's documentation that we can use to see that you have that ability to pay interns kind of in the short term before you receive a reimbursement for the grant. So third, projects should have defined goals and clear deliverables. So individual projects should have finite parameters. Grant programs are really designed to support ongoing idea work within an organization. And then proposals should meaningfully contribute to developing whole history practices. So this is, another way of saying, please don't park interns at a front desk. This is about their really integral involvement in history, doing history with you at your organization, and being an integral part of a project. And we will come back to talking about how to write a deliverable, because that is part of the application process. We'll take a look at that in a moment. So what kinds of projects does this grant fund? Many of you maybe come with, you've already got a defined project in mind, and you're looking for help kind of like how to translate that into the application process. You can tell us about it. But some folks, maybe they're still thinking about what kind of project to include in the application for this grant. So I'll give a couple examples, and we'll share the slides with you later, and you're going to be able to kind of take a look at some additional examples we've collected for you based on past grants. We won't spend time on all of them today, but just to give you a lot of ideas. We'll spend some time looking at the application, and I'll just show you here kind of at the end of the slide presentation. What you'll get later is just a bit of information on the types of projects that this program has already funded, and ones that we would types of projects we would be looking to fund. So as you can see, there's lots of collections projects, education, outreach, strategy, research, all of these areas we are, project areas that we've seen so far funded through the DLH program. And as you can see, there's lots of examples here, and I really invite you to come back to this list if you need some ideas. And feel free to get in touch with me if you have just some questions about activities that we would fund before you dive into the application with your already kind of formulated project idea. So to come back to our application, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now so we can pull up a live application. And I will, there we go. Should have stopped sharing my screen.
No, you stop presenting.
So I'm going to share our application portal. There we go. Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Thumbs up.
Yes.
Okay. So when you log in to start an application through our grant portal, this is kind of like the landing page that you will see. It will have information about both of our open grants, the Heritage Capital Project, and below that you'll see the Diversity and Local History grant. As you can see, it says the grant is open. We'll have the link for you here to read the updated program guidelines. I definitely recommend that you take a look at those. And you'll have this button here that says Start a DLH Grant Application. So you'll want to click that. I'm going to pull up, well, I guess let's just click through and start a new one. All right, good. I was thinking for a moment there. So this is kind of what you'll pull up. And in scrolling down here, I'll just start at the top. This is going to be sort of the highest level summary. And you'll have a title for your project. You'll summarize the work of your internship project. So it's kind of like your elevator pitch. Very small number of characters for this field. So feel free to be very brief because we ask more questions further down in the application that asks you to kind of elaborate on your project. You'll be entering the total intern hours requested. And so, you know, here I've just entered 20 hours. The calculation here will, it will automatically calculate, you know, times $21 an hour. So you'll get the amount here. You can see it kind of automatically generated this $420. But if I'm saying, well, we want to have 2 interns, oh, it doesn't look like maybe it's calculating yet, but that it should calculate times 2. Okay, got it. Just total amount of hours is what you'll see calculated. And then here you'll be entering any payroll taxes you anticipate needing to pay. That is also an eligible expense to include here in your grant request. So enter that there. And there's another field here, so you can estimate the amount of funding needed to cover benefits. And then you'll see below calculated the total grant amount requested. All right, so the organization profile.
Aletheia, I'll just hop in to mention that
Yeah.
Sometimes the form, if the calculations aren't showing up right away, you might have to click in the bottom right save for the form to regenerate those numbers. So
yes,
sometimes when you get started, it'll show the calculations, but sometimes it needs a save and a refresh to calculate them. So if you're entering numbers and things aren't looking right, just save or save and close and then let it refresh and it should calculate and you might have to try that twice if it still isn't working, but it should get there eventually.
Thanks, Jay. Yes. So here, this is the area where we're asking for you to designate. Well, first you would enter your organization, and then you have here a field to add the primary contact. So there's three different individuals we want to see designated here. So there's the primary contact. There's the person who's going to be coordinating with us, with me, for administrative purposes for the grant. That would be on finalizing a contract, coordinating grant payments. There's also a field to enter the individual who will be the authorized signatory. This could be the same individual, but often they're different people in an organization. And this is the person who's authorized to sign the grant contract on behalf of the organization's governing body. Finally, we already talked a little bit about the project manager. The project manager is the person who's going to be managing the grant project and, acting as a mentor to the intern, and who will be providing guidance on their work, project support, professional development. And so sometimes there will be three different individuals who are designated here. Sometimes it's the same individual, and it's okay either way. This is just to make sure we're not assuming anything about how these roles might be separated in your organization. We will be wanting you to talk about full-time paid staff here. This is kind of giving us a sense of like who is working in your organization, what are their roles and responsibilities. If you have part-time paid staff, this is the field where you would be entering in those individuals. We also want to know about your board and what your board is like. So here you'd enter how many board members do you have. In this field, there's a chance to tell us about your volunteers. So and these it would be active volunteers who are not currently serving on your board. So just knowing that board members are also volunteers, but this is about the pool of volunteers who are not on the board. And in this field below, you'll see that we are asking you to fill in the annual operating budget for your organization. And here below, finally, in this section, we'll be asking you to tell us about the objects in your collection. So we're asking you to estimate the number of objects in your collection, and then estimate the number of archival materials in your collection. So that's for photographs, documents, books. And then there's an optional question that you can complete here about telling us if you know the amount of archival materials in your collection measured in linear feet. All right, so now we're digging into the inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility specific parts of the grant project in this section of the application. So we're asking, generally, why is it important that your heritage organization embrace inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility? And I will just say here that this is a great moment for you to take a look at how we define inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility in the guidelines, especially if you're kind of trying to get some ideas about how to answer this question. We would also anticipate that the way you talk about these words is specific to your organization. And so speaking very specifically about how you are addressing inclusion, how you are addressing diversity here is great. And so we're really looking here for, that kind of specific and personal or organization specific connection here. We're interested in knowing if your organization has engaged in any inclusion, diversity, equity, or accessibility planning. And so we have in this field options. It's kind of a check the box. So you can kind of check multiple of these options. So there's different ways to answer this, like maybe you have a committee addressing this. Well, you can check that box. Maybe you've released a public statement or a commitment. So there's multiple ways where we're imagining you've kind of been involved in something of a planning or a strategic process. But just keep in mind that this grant is not only available to if you've done any number of these things. You could be kind of just starting out or at the beginning of your journey. So don't be discouraged or feel like this is going to be working against you somehow if there haven't been many of these things that you could check off here. Similar with the next field, we're asking if your organization has done any inclusion, diversity, equity, or accessibility training. That could be internal or external. And we have, again, these options for check the box where, just letting us know what the audiences for those trainings have been. This is really just to give us a sense of where you're at. And you could be just at the beginning of this work, and that's great. This grant is here to support you as well, if you're just at the beginning, but it helps us learn about you and just get a sense for who you are. All right, so this section of the application is about the project description. So we want to know, is this a new project or is this an existing initiative? That's just to kind of give us a sense of where this sits on the continuum of the scope of the work you've already been doing. And this is the section where you'll be putting together some deliverables. And what we mean by deliverables are they're really things that you could show us, and that we could look at to say, oh, this is something that came out of the project. That's, maybe it's a document, maybe it's a spreadsheet, maybe it's a slideshow, maybe it's kind of a summary of work you did to connect with community partners, and just kind of like a bit of a running reflection of logging the impact of some of your work. So as you can see here, we have a field where we're asking for, okay, how would you describe this deliverable? Let's just say that you have you were doing a collections inventory for a specific collection, and at the end of that inventory you are going to have a kind of maybe a spreadsheet that shows based on for each catalog record that you inventoried, like a corresponding kind of like action or takeaway based on the process that you went through. You could tell us when that started, and then like when you think that would end, that inventory that you did, the hours it took you, and then kind of tell us about what that looks like. Like I was just saying, this is this spreadsheet reflects the outcomes of the inventory that we did for this specific collection, and this collection's importance to telling histories in our area. So it can be very simple, and hopefully is just something you would maybe naturally have at the end of a project that you would not only be sharing or using internally, but is also something you have to share with us. So it's hopefully not about creating new work for you to do, but just showing us the work that you did. And we hope that, with most projects, we imagine that there'll be like, a couple different deliverables. So you would click this box here if you had another deliverable and you would have another set of fields to fill out like your second deliverable. And you can keep going, you can keep checking the boxes. And so, you know, if there's a lot of things that you anticipate that you would have to show that can really help demonstrate to us, like you know, we were able to complete the work we set out to do, or, you know, this is what we have to show at the end of this project that we scoped with you. That's great. That's where you can tell us about it. So at this, when you get to this field, I would also say, you know, I'm going to keep talking about the guidelines a lot, but we have a link embedded here to navigate back to the guidelines for the grant. And I would say when you get to the writing your deliverables, I would say go back to the guidelines, because we do have some examples of deliverables and how you might go about looking at a project that you want to do and then imagining into the future of, well, I think we'll have X and Y at the end of this, and this is how we can talk about that and anticipate that we'll produce that. We'll tell you this is what we'll have to show at the end. And so I think it will give you some good concrete ideas about if you're doing this type of project, maybe you'll have these types of things at the end, and that's what you can you know, work towards and prepare to share when you do your final report. That's when we would be looking to receive this kind of final documentation that supports the deliverables that you scoped out in the beginning. I would also say this is just a technology thing that works and applies to all applications, but save as you go. I think that once in a while, you know, whether it's you know, sometimes Wi-Fi cuts out, or I don't know, just depending on where you're working. We don't want you to lose information. It can be so frustrating to get far down in an application and then just think, oh no, I lost some of my work. And, you know, we know that, you know, any grant portal system can, you know, once in a while, like itself be glitchy. And so just save as you go, good rule of thumb, especially at this point, if you've already gotten through thinking through some deliverables. Another thing I like to do when I'm filling out grants is have like a Word doc open where I have like all of the things that, all of the fields kind of in that Word document. And I'm kind of answering things there. So, and then I'm just kind of copy pasting it in. You know, certainly it's nice to enter into these fields when there's a, you know, there's a character limit. So you know that you're working within the character limit and not writing too much. But that's just one other way to ensure that none of your like hard work gets lost. It would be such a bummer. Okay, so here we go. Now we're at project logistics. So what we want to see here is you're describing your readiness to begin your project. So telling us what date you plan to begin, that you've kind of already thought about a timeline. What other work needs to be completed before you can begin? This just lets us in on your process and your thinking and the preparation work that you've already done, because that helps us understand that this is, you know, this is a project that, you know, the opportunity is now. It fits with your organizational timeline, and you can help bring us up to speed about what that looks like. We have a field to indicate what percentage of this project could be completed remotely. That's something that we imagine is going to happen a lot these days with more remote work happening. So that gives us a window into how you think the work should happen. We also have a field asking how many hours per week are you planning for the intern to be working on this project? We understand that this is an estimate, and you know, once you're working with your intern and they're hired, you're you know, you have expectations for them, but you're also wanting to work with the schedule that they have. But we want to get a sense for what you feel is like the ideal and kind of your expectations in the process. We do ask that you just confirm that you will have consistent funds to be able to pay interns twice per month before receiving a reimbursement. And that's something we talked about earlier when we touched on grantee responsibilities, just because that ensures that like the type of grant this is going to work with the project that you have, because we reimburse based on your sending us proof of payment of the intern, timesheets where activities the intern is doing is described. So we have to receive that to kind of do our own due diligence to check in on the work happening, and then we reimburse you. So that's why that's a confirmation we'll need for you to have here. Okay, so this is a fun section because it's really our chance to hear from you why you think that this project is impactful for your organization. So we'd like you to describe how your project will help improve diversity within the historical narrative your organization is sharing, or apply inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility practices in your operations and programming. So there's a lot of ways to frame impacts. I think there's a lot of breadth here to work within. And certainly these character fields are longer because maybe you have a lot to say. We don't want to cut you off in any way. But I would say, you know, if you just have sort of like a brief way to address this, that's kind of direct and to the point, that's great. Like, we don't anticipate you need to use all of these characters. This is just to make sure you have the opportunity and to not shortchange you on your chance to share with us. So finally, we have these fields here. We're interested in your describing how this project will broaden your organizational audience, contribute into audience diversity, or strengthen community engagement. We're also interested in your describing how the project will support the long-term sustainability of your organization. And then finally, we would like you to describe your organizational inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility goals and plans beyond the completion of this grant project, and how you will leverage this project to advance future idea work in your organization. So this is giving us a window into what this project will enable you to do in the future, you know, how you feel like it's kind of part of the bigger story of where your organization is going. And that's helpful context for us to have. And I'm just going to check the chat here. We do have a couple questions, and I might ask that we come back to questions after we've gone through the application. But I see that there's questions happening, and I see Jay actually responding as well. So thank you for all those questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll be coming back to them and looking at them after this part of the presentation is done. Okay, so here we are at documents. These are the documents we'll be looking for you to upload with the application. They are fairly standard. There is an IRS determination letter. This is for nonprofits only. There is and I'll just go here to kind of show that there's going to be these plus signs that illuminate when you hover over them. Oh, wow. I think it just logged me out. So I'm going to log back in. It didn't like me pressing that button. Never had that happen before. That's fun. Okay, we're going to go back in. Please hold. So these plus signs, that's what you're going to press to open up the box that's going to allow you to upload your document. So let me try it one more time and see what happens. Okay, here we go. So upload files. You can actually drag files into this box. And so, that makes it easier if, you have a document that's, a file you've got on your desktop or whatever, just drag it in here. And you'll be given some options. You can upload the files. And same thing for each of these, how you're going to be adding them. You'll have next a roster of governing authority members. So this is your list of members of your board, a tribal council, for example, or any other kind of governing body that you might have. This would include affiliations and the length of their current terms. Then an organizational chart. And I would say here the caveat is if you have 10 or more employees. Certainly there's organizations that are one employee or no employees and all volunteer. So don't worry about that. But this is something that really is important if you have one to share with us. Current financial statement. This is the documentation that you have cash on hand to consistently pay an intern. That can be a balance sheet or a cash flow statement. And that's helping us, again, as we were saying, because this is a reimbursement based grant program, that you're able to pay interns in lieu of the disbursement, the reimbursement arriving to you after you submit your documentation, your proof of payment to the intern, and the documentation of their activities. Other supporting documents you'll need to upload. These are things that you can upload if you feel that it's helpful for us in reviewing your application. Maybe it's images, or just something that's helping you show if you've described any like prior planning that this project is connected to, whether it's a strategic document or a strategic plan, something to do with your capacity you just want us to know about. It's all helpful, but this is optional. All right. And with that, we've reached the end of the application. Jay, I'm wondering if you want to add anything before we kind of navigate away from this window that we could kind of emphasize.
Yeah, just from a kind of functional standpoint, so there's kind of two modes. There's edit mode and then there's view mode. And that is so that you can kind of save when you're done and it saves in the system. And then another person from your organization could log in and be like, oh, I'm the one providing this document or that document. And so different people can work on the same application, not at the same time. So you can only have one person at a time in that edit mode. But then once you go into view mode, it's saved in the system. And then when you're all done, you have to be sure to hit submit. So the button to go into edit mode is in the upper right, and it's not showing here because she's in edit mode. And then in the bottom right, you can see the option buttons, the cancel, save and close. So when you're in just view and no longer editing, it'll have a submit button there. So just be sure that when you're all done, that you actually hit submit, because then it will come to us instead of just being saved in your account.
Thank you, Jay. I just muted myself because Jay and I are in the same office presenting today. Well, with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and navigate away from the application page. I'm going to share my presentation, my slides again. So just a moment while I pull those back up. You know what? I actually only have one more slide, so I think I'm gonna stop all my screen sharing and just stick with y'all, and we're gonna launch into some questions if anyone has any. And maybe I'll take a look at I was looking at the chat too to see if there was anything we missed. But I'd invite anyone who has a question to, whether you just want to come on off mute and ask it, or raise your hand. We can also call on folks that way. But I'm curious what questions have come up while we've been going through this application. Yeah, okay, I see a couple comments. So from Alicia, I was wondering if you've ever had a project proposal that was deemed too big or too advanced for an intern. And I can speak to this a little bit, but I might then hand it off to Jay, because it's before my time, some concrete examples. But I do think that there are types of projects where we would really be looking to we would imagine that instead of it being an intern, it would really need to be completed by a paid staff person, or like the sole kind of responsible, organizational representative. Something we would be looking at would be, for example, maybe you want the intern to come in and do like a full inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility plan. Well, that puts an intern in a position where they might be able to, you might find a very skilled intern who has a lot of, experience doing things like that. But in terms of a project that kind of sets your organization up for kind of really being able to benefit in an ongoing way from that work, that intern is there for kind of a short amount of time, and they don't really have the same access to sort of the levers of like having that plan move forward. They're not necessarily embedded in the organization. Maybe they're short term. So we would be looking for you to kind of like scale that work, not abandon their involvement in a plan. Certainly, like that would be really great. But thinking about a scalable portion of that work where an intern could be set up for success. Maybe it is, and doing interviews with your board members and kind of putting together a summary of board member perspectives on IDEA and what the organization should be doing to address that work or to move forward, and maybe doing a presentation at the end. And then in that case, your deliverable could be a slideshow, a summary documentation of the interviews that happened. It could be, some photos that kind of show like the final meeting where everyone was able to discuss what the intern was able to offer, and maybe some outcomes that the board had, or like takeaways the board had as a result of the intern's work. So I think that there's a way to kind of set them up as a contributor and integrated into a project that kind of lets us know that you're already kind of ready to hold and carry this work before, during, and after the intern leaves. So I think that's a bit of both the readiness and the sustainability piece. And so we would be kind of looking for all those pieces to be connected in terms of what scale project an intern could do. I'll also say that, there's kind of collections work that is more sensitive, that, you know, organizational representatives really need to be leading. And so I think it's thinking about the level of responsibility you're placing on an intern for a project, like maybe a very long term or strategic process. You know, so for example, if you are doing NAGPRA related work, you know, that's going to be something that there's going to be a lot of responsibility. There's going to be a lot of time commitment. There's going to be a lot of, you know, expectation that there's some relationships being built, which maybe might, you know, be ones that are longer than an intern can be there for. So but that said, like maybe there's a part of that process that an intern could be involved in, and just like thinking about a scalable, meaningful experience. Wow, like to be involved in a repatriation process. Wow, that is so exciting. And how could you really set some work up for them that it helps you, you know, lifts the burden for staff or volunteers that are board members, but it's going to be something that the intern is not going to feel like they're holding on their shoulders. They're responsible for, even as a kind of like a short-term project partner. Jay, do you want to jump in?
Aletheia described that really, really well. And I think to emphasize that scalable piece, if like getting an idea of a goal or something that your organization really wants to achieve, and then working with Aletheia to properly scale that for an intern is a really good strategy. And I'll just give a couple of examples of other projects that were a little bit too too ambitious and didn't consider that scalable piece. Like we had someone propose that an intern would basically host a strategic planning process for a board. Like that's way out there for an intern. And then there's been a couple of collections ones where it's like just the number of items and the scope of work that this organization was anticipating that an intern could process in a certain period of time was really high. And so we have our head of collections, Maggie Weatherby, has been involved in lots of conversations with grantees for this program. So if you do have a specific collections related project, she would also be happy to talk with you and help you kind of scale that properly for the intern level work and also the time period, as well as kind of making sure folks understand best practices related to collections. So yeah, I would just, Aletheia gave a really great answer. And if you have questions or concerns about that scale, definitely put some time on Aletheia's calendar to talk through that. And I'm sure she can help get to a good spot where it'll be a good project for an intern.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, and it's a great question. I'm glad that you asked it. I'm glad that we had a chance to discuss it because it's really important. Yeah. Sure, lots of people are thinking about the same question. I see one from Stephanie. So Stephanie is saying, I have several questions and will reach out about them, but describing student, can this be someone who's engaged in independent study or skills building opportunities? We work with people who are interested in the field of preservation at cohort projects, i.e. Black spatial history at Wari in Seattle. And that's a great question too. I don't have as much experience, I think, in seeing some of the cases that could come up with this. So I actually might ask Jay again to maybe speak to how student can be understood in different projects.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we defined student kind of as broadly as we could, with still having some parameters on it. And so what we've defined that as is a student who's in kind of any type of higher education program. So if it's an associate's degree at a community college or even a PhD, you know, all the way up to a PhD, or I think it was either 4 or 5 years graduated, and I'm pulling up the guidelines right now to see which I forget exactly what it was off the top of my head. So it's quite a wide range. So I think it might depend, Stephanie, on the individual and kind of their history and where they are in their academic sort of journey. But hopefully there would be some some overlap with someone who's recently graduated or maybe in a program. So let's see if I can, within the last 5 years. Okay, yeah, so that does give you a pretty good range. And it does need to be a program that is, they need to be either in or have graduated from some type of program related to humanities broadly, or we tried to make that also as broad as possible. So anything related to, history, or sort of sociological topics. So again, tried to make it really broad and inclusive, but with having some type of guardrails on there of like, we're trying to guide professionals or provide support and opportunities for folks looking to get into the museum professions.
And yeah, and Stephanie, happy to connect about additional questions if you had. Sounds like you have some questions.
Can you hear me okay?
I
Just really
can,
quickly? Yeah, just really
Yes.
quickly on that, just to expand on that, is that we always look for opportunities to be able to expand the interest of people who are interested in preservation and the advocacy. And that comes with our challenge, is that often we find that Black folks in our community are sitting in a space where maybe they haven't had all the formal training, but they have opportunities like Black Spatial History, where it's a defined program and project where they're receiving skills-based, these opportunities to learn, whether it's oral history, collecting oral history, archival work. So that's what brought me to that question about student. So I'm happy to talk to you more about that. And this is a time when we're really trying to encourage people in our community to participate in the work that we're doing. So we look at it with a really open lens. And I hope that at some time WSHS will as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate you bringing up that case and also kind of describing the impact of that work. One thing I'm thinking of, just maybe off the top of my head as a way to kind of work with some of the students, who are students like you. I think you described like continuing their education through this work with you, but not this traditional kind of like pathway of students who are pursuing a degree, or just out of a degree program that's like in the heritage or museum area. Is I wonder if there's a way to work with a student who is like a student from in like a more traditional capacity, like maybe coming out of a information or library science or museology program, but the project could be working with your continuing education, like sort of your cohort of learners that you are working with. So that maybe intern who's maybe coming from like a more traditional path is actually like getting a chance to learn from the learners, and the learners are learning from the person in the more kind of like traditional program, and they're all maybe getting to kind of benefit from the kind of the work. So maybe having like a learner community where there's a bit of crossover of people who are from different kinds of learning backgrounds, but I don't know, that's just one kind of like workaround or way to address like the different kinds of folks you'd like to work with on the project. We should talk more about it. And I see a comment from Roger. Hey, Roger. The interested are not usually skilled until we introduce them to the technology. Yeah, yeah, and I think you're bringing up these points of like, you know, sometimes it's the desire to actually have these kinds of skill learning opportunities where you are providing, you are in the position of being that continuing education, not working with students who are doing like their kind of degree, but like they're actually coming to you to exercise and build these skills and develop skills and be participants in keeping heritage and history, you know, alive as well. So I think this is a lot of good things for us to think about at WSHS moving forward. I'm checking the chat to see if there's any other comments or questions. Yeah, any other questions that come up for folks about other parts of the application process that we can dig into now? Okay. Well, I did drop the guidelines link in the chat, so you can take a look at that. I also wanted to put in the chat a link just to our DLH website, which talks about timelines, and you can look at past and current grant projects. And we, of course, have these slides that we've gone over today that we will also share out with you afterward. And there'll be kind of a bundle of different like examples of projects we've had so far, and ones that we really haven't seen and we would love to see. And so I hope that can kind of inspire you to kind of like how you're thinking about creating a project to propose for us. Let's see here. I see one other question from Roger. Roger says, I find elders being interested but may not be eligible because of the standing guidelines within our community. Can that be addressed? Yeah, I think that the, yeah, maybe, I don't know if Roger, if you have audio today, if you want to come on off mute and say a little bit more about this. I'm not sure if you can. I'm happy to address it otherwise, but.
Usually, can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Usually we have a lot of elders who are very, very interested in engaging in it because the history is something very important to them. They can associate with it. They're kind of connected, and even their offspring and their ancestry is connected with it. So they're far more engaged to learn about it and try to master it and participate in it, so that let's use the term, we can get it right for them. And yet and still they don't meet any of the criteria that you guys have for a potential intern, yet they would probably fare even better because they're at home, they're retired, they need something to engage in, and they would be extremely productive and they'll be enthusiastic about the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, you know, all of this is really important for thinking about the future of the grant and its ability to meet the needs of organizations who want to work with members of communities that are really eager to get involved in history and heritage work, and you know, and also kind of the current scope of the grant, which is really to kind of be funding paid internships for folks who are kind of trying to get their foot in the door, coming out of a program, kind of start their career, more emerging into career employment in arts and heritage. So I think it's just good long-term thinking for us to do, you know, hearing about like some of the pressing needs of organizations in doing this work. I am curious, and maybe it's good to explore with you too, Roger, this idea of you know, if you find that you currently have capacity to work with some of these elders that want to get involved, or if you feel like you know, an intern could be of support, like coming out of maybe a traditional sort of like degree program or in a degree program, you know, who's wanting to understand like the importance of working with elders, like the importance of hearing with elders as part of like our history, would be something, paying someone like that would be supportive to you to kind of provide some coordination help or some dedicated time and energy to working with that elder community. So I guess I'm thinking about, you know, in the more short term, if there's a way for another individual of this kind of category of student as we have it, they could be helpful to you in this kind of like serving and hearing from elders. That's just one idea, not I think addressing directly the needs that you're describing, but it's one thing that comes to my mind anyway. But thank you for describing the background of your question. All right. Well, we are shy of our 10:30 time. So I think if there aren't any more questions to discuss in our group today, I'd love to talk with each of you individually and get more time to talk through some of the questions you're like maybe forming or ideas that you have on this call. You know, I think we should continue the conversation, but oh, and I'm gonna come back to Stephanie's comment in the chat. Stephanie says the field of historic preservation and increasing access and opportunities has been ongoing for a number of years. How we act and respond is in an inclusive way is my point. Thanks for all you're doing. More later. Yes. I think that we are really interested in hearing. I think, you know, we are certainly talking about the Diversity in Local History grant, but beyond that, the work of the Heritage Outreach Department is really to listen closely to the needs and desires of our local history and heritage organizations, and to be responsive more generally. And so I think some of this conversation is really good. We have Allison on the call, of course, who works with a lot of organizations and is also always on the lookout for how to be responsive to what we are hearing from history organizations, especially as Stephanie and Roger are pointing out, how do we ensure that resources are designed inclusively and getting to the root of some of the needs and the ways that capacity can be greater, and there can be impact in history organizations. So just to acknowledge all of this great feedback, and also my other colleagues on this call who I think are together, we are really glad to be listening and to be thinking about responses too. So with that, I think that I will just say we'll give the gift of time, and I'm sure you have other meetings and things to be doing in your day. And I encourage you all to reach out to me and just to say hi, or let me know if you're in the process of thinking about your grant submission. I'd love to know how I can be of help. And have a great rest of your Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.